Welcome to the DFL Breakdown, presented by GrizLeeGear, with your hosts, Lucas Ford and Ricky Epperson.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the DFL Breakdown, the #1 cartoon side character themed, league-specific, weekly fantasy football podcast in the world. We are back.
That's right.
And it is time for another banger episode. I didn't get Ricky in on this one again this week here. It's been harder and harder for me to stay up for our late night recording, so I am doing this one Thursday morning here. It is the 12th of December, 2024, and we got a great game tonight, the Rams versus the 49ers, with a ton of fantasy implications. But speaking of fantasy implications, we had our regular season finale this last week, and the stage is now set for the playoffs. There was plenty of heartbreak, plenty of people hoping for miracles, game breakers, massive performances, all sorts of crazy stuff happening, and everything has finally shaken out and come down to this. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened this past week and see how these playoffs are going to turn out for the Dimmadome this year. And let's start with our game breaker here. Let's do it.
I'm coming! Here I come! Gamebreaker.
Okay, this is a little bit of a funny game breaker because Josh Allen put up the most dominant fantasy quarterback finish ever in history, and he's still not going to be our game breaker this week because Lehman didn't end up pulling out the win. And that was a huge part to our real game breaker this week, Jamar Chase putting up 46.1 points late Sunday night, keeping Nate out ahead of Lehman here and really just hammering that finish home for him. Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 1 this year, so far at least. He's got the most receptions and the most yards. That's what you want out of your wide receiver, and Nate is getting it in a big way here. The Bengals finally made their way back into the win column, and Jamar Chase was a huge part of that. So congrats to Nate for having the game breaker, and congrats to the Bengals for finally pulling out a win. That 46.1 point performance out of Jamar Chase was massive. All right, let's talk about that matchup here in our score summary, and we can get to exactly what happened to Lehman and how he managed to blow a performance that was 60 points out of his quarterback to start. Let's do it.
Score summary.
Right, yeah, so like I said, this was a massive one for the Hamburglar, the Goofy Goober Bath Salts that they've been rebranded to for their matchup against the Toaster Bats. He got a lot of great performances, 22 out of James Conner, 23 out of Kyron Williams, even got 13 out of Tucker Kraft, and 40 points at a Jordan Addison, who scored 3 touchdowns on 8 receptions for 133 yards. But yeah, Jamar Chase, 46.1 points. He got a 14-yard carry. He had 2 touchdowns, 14 receptions for 177 yards. Even Chris Boswell put up almost 17 for him here. So a massive 189-point week for the Hamburglers, securing and sealing their spot in the playoffs. And the Toaster Bats fighting for everything with it all on the line, put up a great effort, 141 points for him, but it didn't end up being enough. In fact, I don't even think it made the median this week. He took 2 losses on this one. It was a pretty high median this week, it turned out. We already talked about Josh Allen, 58 points on the day. He scored 6 total touchdowns, 3 on the ground for himself and 3 through the air, 342 yards passing, 82 yards rushing. Just the craziest fantasy football performance anyone of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. So, yeah, I mean, that can't ask for more than that out of your quarterback, but there are a couple areas where he definitely wanted some improvement. It wasn't David Montgomery, Chase Brown, or Jackson Smith and Jigba. They were all, right around 20 to 25 points here, but as you get to the bottom of his lineup, you can see what happened. Marvin Harrison, only 8.9, Gesicki, 5.4, Bucky Irving got injured early, 2.8. He's been great as the season has gone on here, so that was a big disappointment for Lehman. His kicker only got 4 points. The Bears defense, he picked them up late, slapped him in. They got -6 points versus the San Francisco 49ers. Didn't do anything good besides an int and a sack, but allowed 38 points. It was a miserable game for the Bears. And then Brian Branch, only with 3 tackles. Not anything crazy for him. So a lot of red and disappointment at the bottom of the lineup for Lehman, leaving him shy about 45, 49 points or something right around there, and out of the playoffs. So tough luck, Lehman. Better luck in the toilet bowl. We'll see if you end up retaining that poop hat or not here. But Nate will be moving on, especially after that win. He had pretty much locked it up before this anyway, though. Okay, let's talk about a few more matchups. This one I just have to touch on. This is the number 2 all-time score in the league now, just surpassed by my 225-point performance from a few weeks ago. This is the AZ 69ers putting up 213.68 points versus the Stroud Boys, who only scored 115.66. And I'm just going to give it to Alex as a whole. He's
Waiver Warrior
this week. He is the waiver warrior because he went out and made some serious changes before the game started. Picked up Jake Ferguson that somebody dropped, picked up Zach Charbonnet on waivers, and picked up Sam Darnold that Mike had dropped as well. And plugged them all in, and they were great for him. I mean, it wasn't really Fergie necessarily, but everybody else was fantastic for him. Obviously, the 44 points out of Sam Darnold was a huge part of this. Getting almost 40 out of Zach Charbonnet off waivers is pretty nice, too. So congrats to Alex for that waiver warrior here. Could have given it to you multiple times, but there's only one per week, so... You won quite handily. You won by almost 100 points. Great weeks out of pretty much everyone on your team except the Miami defense. The same can't be said for Eric here. Only 8 out of Pacheco, 4.9 out of James Cook. It seemed like they barely used him in that game, which was super weird. 6 carries and 2 receptions. I wonder what's going on behind the scenes there. Mike Evans, he came back. He's been good since he's been back from that injury, but not so much this week. Only 4 receptions for 69 yards. And, not too many other bright spots. Zach Bond did score 20.5 points. He had 11 tackles and a sack with 2 quarterback hits versus the Panthers. You really expected the Eagles to win by more than 6 versus the Panthers, though. So this was kind of a crazy game to watch. Zach Bond was absolutely flying around, though. So regardless, it didn't end up making a difference. Alex goes home with the 2-0. He worked his way into the playoffs and managed to hold his spot here. And even though Eric took the 0-2, no one else was able to come up and snatch that from him. So he is actually the 6th seed moving forward as well. Congrats to both of you guys on your playoff finishes. Obviously, the Stroud Boys just kind of hobbling across the line here, but they made it, and you can't take it from them, so congrats. Let's talk about now a matchup that didn't have as much on the line here. This one ended up being...
Wet Noodle Fight of the Week.
And it was the Dogs versus Herbert the Pervert. 87 points for the Dogs, 107 for Herbert the Pervert. these guys kind of leaving points on the board for sure. George Pickens and Kenneth Walker were both game time decisions that didn't end up going. You can tell how closely these two are paying attention to those sort of things because they both left him in. So 0 points out of either of those players here. 2 points each out of their defensive players when they were projected much higher. Is kind of telling the story of this one as well. Patrick Mahomes wasn't that great. And we also had Justin Herbert here only getting 15.7. So those guys were pretty close as well. Najee Harris didn't have a dominant performance. Tony Pollard about average. Really just a lot of low down performances here. Mike got 20.2 points out of Rome Odunze, and Corey got 20.2 out of Cooper Kupp. So that's a funny little stat comparison as well. A lot of equal stuff across the board, but the main difference being Justin Jefferson putting up 32.2 with 2 touchdowns on 7 receptions and 132 yards, and Jaden Reed putting up a big fat 0 on Thursday night against the Lions. So, yeah, 87 to 107, that pretty much makes the difference there and gives Mike the win. Neither of these guys got a median win either, so can't hang their hats on that one, but Mike getting at least a matchup win and moving from 6 wins to 7 for the first time in a long time, adding to that win column. But Corey finishes the regular season at 9-19, and Herbert the Perverts at 7-21. All right, let's talk about some of our upper end contenders here. It's the George Droid versus the Perfect Cell team. That's Ricky versus Riley, and this one was a slugfest. They both ended up taking the median win, but Ricky just barely managed to hang on at the end. He went out and picked up Caleb Williams to start him this week over Kyler Murray. Didn't end up being the correct choice, but he had the room to do it anyway, so there you go. Didn't cost him the win, so it was a move he could make at least. Jahmyr Gibbs was great for him again, scoring another touchdown, 6 receptions. He's just always involved. Tyreek Hill with 28.1 points. He had a pretty long touchdown at the end of that game. He wasn't super involved throughout all of it, just had a lot of short yardage stuff, but then got a massive touchdown at the end. Ended up being the difference in this one here. CeeDee Lamb got 22.4, Tyreek Hill 28.1, and Ricky only won by 5. So that really is what made the difference here. Garrett Wilson scored 18.4 compared to DJ Moore's 10.9, so you could argue something about that as well, because everything else was somewhat close. Brock Bowers and TJ Hawkinson right around 9 points each. Their kicker right around 10. 11-9 for their defenses, and 10-15 for their defensive players. So Ricky just got slight edges in a few spots here, and that ended up making the difference. But 2 massive performances from playoff teams. This is a nice little playoff warm-up. If our playoff matches all look like this, I'll be very excited for the rest of the year to watch them. So, good game to the 2 of you guys. Unfortunately, Riley taking home the 1-1 finish, and Ricky taking home the 2-0, finishing the season at 23-5. What a dominant performance out of the Perfect Cell, the Sorcerers, Lord Alark, Ricky's team, however you want to call it. What a great season for those guys here. Let's look at we talked about the Toaster Bass, we talked about the Dogs, the 69ers, and the Droids. We've got the Women in the Kitchen versus the newly rebranded Poop Hat Will Be Mine team here. Chris actually dropped a match to Dylan on this one, and it was a close one, but one that Chris wanted to take home to hopefully try to get up to that top spot. Wasn't able to do it. Dylan getting 25 points out of Baker Mayfield and another 25 out of Rashad White was great. He also got 26.8 out of It's Isaac Garendo. I wanted to say Isaiah. Isaac Garendo, 26.8 as well. That was someone he just picked up and plugged in. That was a big start for a lot of people this week. Jalen Waddle, 20.9. Even Njoku got a touchdown, 17.2 points there. I believe he picked up Christian Watson in free agency as well. He scored 13.4. Even the Jags defense was a good option for him as well. So a lot of good choices getting you to that 155-point finish and taking the win over Chris. Chris had Joe Burrow going, who scored 30 points. Josh Jacobs, who scored about 25, but had to fire up Jerome Ford, who only scored 7.7. T. Higgins was not very involved in that game, 4.3. And even though George Kittle was fantastic and Jonnu Smith in the flex was good as usual, he even got 22.8 points out of his kicker. Only 2 points out of his defensive player, 5 points out of his defense. And then that disappointment out of T. Higgins that I mentioned really ended up making the difference in this one. So, nice win for Dylan. Congrats there, taking one home at the end of the year, playing for pride, playing to spoil. Didn't knock Chris out or anything, but didn't let him improve his position here. Dylan finishes at 12-16, and Chris at 20-8. Okay, we've got one more matchup to talk about from last week. I've been avoiding it, but I can't avoid it any longer. It's my matchup versus the sleepers. The door was open for me to walk through here. If I finished 14-14, if I got my 2-0 victory here, I would have been in the playoffs. And I just couldn't get there. I didn't have Drake May this week, so I decided to start Will Levis versus the Jaguars. He's been pretty hot the last couple weeks. Not anything crazy, but around 20 points every week. So thought I could get something like that out of him, which would have been a lot better. The 15 points I missed out on pretty much made the difference there, but he wasn't the only one that was disappointing. I really only got 5 points out of my kicker, and I really wanted a big night out of him. That was the Sunday night game that we talked about, the Chargers versus the Chiefs, and I really was just hoping for long kicks that whole time because I was in a hole pretty bad watching that game here. Saquon Barkley only scored 14 points in that matchup against the Panthers. Like I said, that was super disappointing, especially watching Chuba Hubbard on the other side excelling versus the great Eagles defense that has been shutting people down the last few weeks. Isaiah Davis off waivers, the third-string running back in New York, scored more points than Saquon Barkley this week. So that really hurts. Only got 10 points on Thursday out of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And that's kind of the story of how this went. Just a couple disappointments here and a really bad quarterback performance. And that's what you end up with 115 points for here. Not enough to take a win off of anything. So I got the 0-2 on this one and finished the season at 12-16. Artie did have a great week here. He moves to 7-21 as well. Didn't quite make the median either, despite scoring 131 points. It was, like I said, a high median week here. Tua, almost 28 points on the day. He was great versus the Jets. We talked about Chubbard and Davis. Let's talk about A.J. Brown only getting 4 receptions in that same Panthers game. Seems like all the studs this week weren't as reliable as random guys you could pick up on waivers, and that was the story for a lot of guys. So anyone who's out there making moves ended up benefiting. And, Artie was one of those people. Thielen scoring 20 points in that game as well. Sterling Shepard scoring 10 points. And even though Kelsey only got 9.5, didn't end up needing much more than that. Jake Moody got 8. The Philly defense got 4, like we talked about. Devon Witherspoon got 7.5. Bringing him to about 131. So good win for Artie there. Managed to spoil my hopes for sure. He was playing hard till the end, made his waiver moves, and got the win. Moved to 7-21 to finish the season there. All right, yeah, that was last week's matchups. That sets the stage for the playoffs here. Our brackets are set, and we have playoff action in our future, at least for the 6 teams that made it here. So let's talk about exactly what happened with the scoring. You can see that even though I got my 100% finish, it wasn't enough for the win this week. Same can't be said for Artie because he did get the win, though Riley was also 100% efficient and still didn't get it as well. So, like I said, crazy meeting. It was like 142 points. Lehman didn't even get there at 141, even though he had more in the tank. Just couldn't quite get there, especially with these massive performances up at the top here. So this is what our final standings look like. We have, oh my god, my alarms, please. We we have Perfect Cell up at the top, 23 and 5 for him. He's in first place and gets the bye. 20 and 8 for the women in the kitchen. They're in second place. They get a bye as well. Nice little shakeup right in the last week here. The Hamburglar moves to third and bumps George Droid down to fourth with 18 and 10 finishes. The points are in the favor of Nate and the Hamburglar, so that is why he is now in third place. Alex moves up to fifth place, getting into the playoffs on a 3-week, 6-game win streak. This was huge for him, and he did get in, so congrats on that one. Had a ton of points on the year too, so can't complain too much. Anybody else on the outside looking in, he did earn that one. A little more arguable for the Stroud boys. Eric only scored a little under 1,800 points this year. Pretty low in the scheme of the whole season here, but in any case, did get the wins where he needed them and squeaked into 6th place on that one. Lehman with the heartbreak here, 13 and 15, just under a neutral season. Instead, does have the losing record, and moves to the toilet bowl. Myself included, I'm in 8th place, 12 and 16 here. I tied with Dylan's record, but scored about 250 more points, which is why I am in 8th place and he's in 9th. Corey at 9 and 19 in 10th place, and then we've got the Bill Cosby Sleepers and Herbert the Pervert both at 7 and 21, tied for last place and getting that bye in the toilet bowl here. So we've got 4 teams not playing this week. And that makes a big difference in our projection preview here. Could be a little shorter this week because we've only got a few games of action. But let's go ahead and get right into it, and we can talk about exactly how these playoffs are going to go.
Projection preview.
Let's take a look at this here. We've got just these 4 games. It's the first round of the toilet bowl and the first round of the playoffs, with our bye teams sitting back and taking just a look at what's happening here. Let's start with me versus Dylan. We're tied at 12 and 16. We're in 8th and 9th place, and we are playing against each other this week. I don't think he's actually going to start Desmond Ridder, though he might. He said the poop hat will be mine, so I don't know if he's going to actively tank or just passively tank here, but, I'm hoping for a good game regardless. He benched Baker Mayfield and Matt Stafford to put in Ridder, but this was because Ridder, at least last night, had like negative 30 points projected or something. It was like a little bit of a glitch or something like that, so we wanted to see what would happen to his projections. And he plugged him in, but I don't think this is how this matchup is going to end up starting here, but if he does, he's playing on Monday night. We've got Drake May back in the lineup for me versus the Cardinals. Saquon Barkley still going. I I don't have any part of this game tonight, but I do have some of that Monday night action as well with Ginkelberg going versus Chicago. Ooh, that's 8 o'clock, and this is 8:30. Looks like there's a double header this week on Monday night, so I didn't quite count that into my calculations here, but in any case, the bye weeks are over, so every team is playing football this week, and that's probably why we got 2 Monday night games. If Garendo does play, Dylan's firing him up versus the Rams tonight, so we'll see what's going on with him there. If he's still just as plug and play as every San Francisco 49ers running back has been this year, or if the injury gets the better of him. He's still got DK Metcalf, who started the year on my team. A fun little reunion here to see how that's going to go. Jalen Waddle and Njoku are starting for him as well. He picked up Vele this week to put back in his lineup. This is someone who's been in and out of his lineup here. The Broncos were on bye last week, so Vele now getting the start for him here now that they're back. Brought back the New York Jets defense, dropped the Jags for him, so we'll see if that's a good choice because they are playing against each other this week as well. And Tank Dell making a reappearance in my lineup. I can't get rid of that guy. I love him, so that's just how that's going to be. I'm projected to win, but again, we got Desmond Ridder in there. I don't think the projections would change too much with another quarterback, maybe another couple points, but projections don't mean jack, especially for the Ball Hogs. It seems like I miss them just about every week, so we'll see what happens there. Okay, we've got, let's talk about a playoff matchup here. This is a big one. Riley was hankering for the bye all year and angling for it, but didn't quite get there, so he is playing round 1 versus the AZ69ers, who are on a hot streak here. They're projected to score a good 7 more points than George Droid, but like I said, there's no bye weeks, so everyone's got their full teams in and playing their best. The Broncos defense is back for George Droid. Brandon Aubrey versus the Panthers. I mean, these are all things that you want to see if you're Riley. Even DJ Moore versus Minnesota Monday night. That should be a big game, and hopefully, if you're Riley, at least they're targeting DJ Moore a lot in the dome there. Kamara is back as well. And yeah, a lot of good points hopefully coming from those guys. On the other side, Alex has Jaden Daniels going in that same Saints game against Kamara. So that's going to be a big game that they are paying attention to. These guys are going to have to wait all the way until 8:30 on Monday night to see Bijan Robinson, Alex's number 1 pick, play in this matchup here. That 8:30 versus the Raiders matchup is going to be what it all comes down to, unless Alex just gets out to an early lead with his other guys here. Jawan Jennings could play a big role in that as well. He is playing tonight versus the Rams, and Puka Nacua is playing tonight versus the Niners in that game. So Alex is looking to get out strong and hopefully keep a lead. But if he can't, then Bijan Robinson may be able to come in at the end and clean up. So right now, Alex is, like I said, projected to win, even though he in the seeding is the underdog, and we'll see what ends up happening there. I'm expecting this to be another barn burner, a close match between these two guys. I'm pretty excited to see it. Okay, let's talk about the other toilet bowl matchup happening this week. That's the Toaster Bats versus the Dogs. Corey still has George Pickens in his lineup, and I don't believe he's going to play this week. We'll see if Corey cares anymore and changes anybody out, or if George Pickens ends up making that flex start with 0 points there. But right now, yeah, he's not projected to score very well, and even if he was getting a good 12-point projection out of George Pickens, he still wouldn't be there. I gotta tell you, I mean, Lehman's team looked scary at the end of the year, and I thought he might squeak in, and that Josh Allen performance really kind of hammered that point home. But unfortunately, even though it wasn't enough for him there, and he is in the toilet bowl, he does at least have the projection favorite in this one here, so might be able to work his way out of the toilet bowl pretty quickly here. if he can just pick up a nice, easy win versus the Dogs, who have been just rolling over and playing dead for the back half of the season, starting zeros, getting turds out of his guys, starting people who are on bye or injured. The Dogs are better than that, so it's pretty sad to see them at this low of a point, but what can you do, I guess? So yeah, the Toaster Bats, I'm predicting a win for them, but if Corey makes some changes or just gets good performances out of his guys, anything is certainly possible here. We'll see what ends up happening in this matchup. But we've got one more playoff matchup to talk about. It's the Goofy Goobers versus the Stroud Boys. Nate has been on a tear and just ending people's lives and seasons with massive performances so far. He's hoping to do it again versus the Stroud Boys, who are only projected to score 118 points. He's still got Aaron Rodgers in his lineup. I'm not sure if he's going to go back to Stroud or not, but Rodgers is actually projected more points. You're the Stroud Boys, though. I would assume you'd put CJ Stroud in. Pacheco is in. Even though he's had a slow start coming back from his injury, might be the game where he finally turns it on versus Cleveland. Got James Cook going, Mike Evans. A lot of the same out of the Stroud Boys here. Not too much has changed from last week to this one. But he's just hoping for a better performance because he's projected to get what he got last week, right around 115, and that's not going to be enough to take down the Goobers unless something goes terribly wrong. Rico Dowdle versus the Panthers, that's supposed to be an exploitable matchup. We'll see if that is the case still. Jared Goff in a dome at home versus Buffalo. That should be a shootout, if anything is to be believed. That should be a fantastic game. Really excited to watch that one. Nate's got Kyron Williams going tonight, another staple of his team, and Nico Collins going against the Dolphins on 1 o'clock on Sunday. So we'll see if Nico Ballins is big in the playoffs or if he somehow falls off. He's been great most of the time this year, so I can't really project anything different for him. Jamar Chase, playoff killer. He's been just ending people's dreams. Jamar Chase has been with Nate here, and he'll see if he can do it again. Versus the Titans, that's a defense that's been beatable the last half of the year as well, even though they started off strong, and could be exploitable for Nate as well. He's got Jordan Addison still in. He's going Monday night versus Chicago. That should be a big game for all teams involved there. He's also got that Minnesota defense in that same matchup. And then he's got his two Steelers down here, Chris Boswell and TJ Watt, going against the Eagles. That's going to be a big game with a lot on the line for those guys as well. So, like I said, Nate is projected to smash this one here. And I don't really see it going a different way, even though Eric's always managed to just squeak out the wins when he needs them. I don't know that he'll be able to overcome this 20-point deficit that he's projected in here. It's just, I don't know. You look across both sides here, and I'd rather have Nate's player in pretty much every position. And that hurts. That hurts your chances for sure. So, that's it. Those are the four matches here. I want to take a look really quickly at the bracket. It kind of looks like this. Whoever wins out of Alex and Riley this week goes on to play Ricky next week, and whoever wins out of Tyke and Nate this week goes on to play Chris. So those two guys are sitting pretty and projected higher even this week than anybody else in the playoffs. They've really earned those buys and are teams to be feared. So these guys playing for the right to face off against our top seeds. Now, in the Toilet Bowl bracket, it's a little bit different, of course. Instead of winning and moving on, you lose and move on here. So whoever loses out of me and Dylan goes on to play against Mike, and whoever loses out of Lehman and Corey goes on to play Artie. Corey is actually the lowest projected out of everyone in the toilet bowl, but again, he's got a 0-point George Pickens in his lineup still, so with someone in there, I think it would actually go down to Artie being the lowest projected. Which again, I mean, yeah, it would be Artie and Mike at the lowest, and they've earned their buys, and they are formidable opponents to try to lose against if you wanted to attain the poop hat this year, like apparently Dylan does. But we'll see what ends up happening with that. Those guys are just waiting around this week for a matchup next week here, and then whoever wins out of these matchups will move on to 8th place and 10th place matchups after that and everything here. We'll see what ends up happening with that next week. But for now, yeah, this is our, shortest projection preview of the whole year. Only 4 games. Well, I think championship week there's still 4 games as well, because of the 10th place and 3rd place games and things like that. So yeah, it shouldn't be too much shorter than this in the future here, but nice quick episode for you to go through everything that happened this past week and what's going to happen this next one. I hope this game tonight, the Rams versus the Niners, is another big game. These two teams are still playing for a lot on the line there. I don't think either of them have been mathematically eliminated, but they're in tough spots, so they want wins. And, a lot of fantasy relevant performers in there. Stafford, Kupp, Puka Nacua, Juwan Jennings, Isaac Garendo, all these guys going tonight. It's going to make a big difference. But until then, I hope you guys enjoy your day. I did want to say thanks so much for listening. I'm going to get this put out right now for you guys so you can tune in, and then we'll all watch the game tonight with bated breath as playoffs start in the Dimmadome. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the DFL Breakdown. Tune in next week for more.